Pay for your sister's crime, my dad said, sliding a printed number across the kitchen table like it was a dinner receipt. The paper stopped in front of me. No greeting. No explanation. Just a total circled in blue ink. My sister sat to his right, eyes red but dry. She wasn't crying anymore. She was waiting. There's an investigation, he continued, voice even. It's a misunderstanding. But it needs to be handled. Quickly. I looked at the number again. It wasn't small. It wasn't symbolic. It was the kind of amount that rearranged lives. She made a mistake, he said. Family fixes family. The way he said it made it sound procedural. Like renewing a license. Like paying property tax. She doesn't have the stability you do. You have savings. A clean record. A real job. His eyes lifted to mine. You're the logical solution. My sister finally spoke. I'll pay you back. It wasn't a plan. It was a placeholder. I folded my hands in my lap. No one asked whether I'd been involved. No one asked whether I'd benefited. No one asked whether I was willing. They weren't discussing responsibility. They were assigning it. And in that quiet kitchen, with the refrigerator humming and the number bleeding blue into white paper, something in me settled. Not hurt. Clarity. There's a specific silence that follows an unreasonable demand. It's not shock. It's recognition. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do simply because you were the reliable one, you know the feeling. Before we go further, take a second. If this story feels familiar, if you've ever been handed consequences that weren't yours, subscribe and stay. These stories aren't about revenge. They're about choosing clarity when pressure tries to rewrite you. Have you ever noticed how the most responsible person in the room somehow becomes the most convenient one to blame? That night at the kitchen table, I noticed. And I stopped mistaking it for coincidence. My sister had always been protected by narrative. She was creative, which meant impulsive. She was sensitive, which meant volatile. She was misunderstood, which meant never fully accountable. I was the opposite. Practical. Steady. Independent. In our family, those words didn't mean appreciated. They meant absorbent. When she failed a semester in college after skipping exams, my dad called me. Can you talk to her? She listens to you. When she maxed out her first credit card before 21, it was framed as a lesson. Help her budget, he said. You're good with money. When she quit a job without notice because her manager didn't respect her energy, my dad asked if she could stay with me for a while. Temporary turned into 6 months. Utilities doubled. Groceries disappeared. She promised she'd figure something out. She always figured something out. Usually I was part of it. None of these moments were explosive. There were no screaming matches. No dramatic confrontations. Just a quiet reallocation of weight. If something cracked, I reinforced it. If something broke, I covered it. If something collapsed, I stood in the gap. I didn't resent her. I didn't resent him. I simply believed that being capable meant being responsible. Until the number on the kitchen table. This wasn't a missed payment. This wasn't immaturity. This was fraud. And suddenly, capability wasn't a compliment. It was leverage. The fraud wasn't complicated. That's what made it dangerous. My sister had been working in accounts coordination for a mid-sized vendor. She had access to invoice routing and payment approvals. Not final authorization, but enough proximity to influence timing. Over 8 months, duplicate vendor accounts were created. Payments were split into smaller transfers. Amounts that didn't trigger automatic review thresholds. The total accumulated slowly. Then an internal audit flagged irregularities. From what my dad explained selectively, investigators were tracing digital signatures, login times, and IP records. The company's insurance would cover some of it. But restitution would still be pursued. She panicked, he said. It got out of hand. Out of hand translated to criminal exposure. I asked one question. Is my name attached to anything? No, he said quickly. Of course not. I verified that later. There were no shared accounts. No co-signed documents. No transfers into my name. I hadn't received $1. Legally, I wasn't implicated. Morally, in their framework, I was elected. She doesn't have what you have, my dad repeated. You're established. This won't ruin you. He said it like resilience was a financial instrument. Like I could absorb impact because I'd built stability carefully. The seriousness wasn't abstract. If restitution wasn't negotiated, there could be charges. Civil claims. Asset seizures. But none of it legally touched me. The pressure wasn't about law. It was about access. Access to the one person in the family who had something to lose. People assume silence means weakness. It doesn't. Arguing would have invited escalation. Emotion would have fueled persuasion. Tears would have reframed me as dramatic. Anger would have reframed me as selfish. I understood the structure too well. If I debated the fairness, we'd spiral into history. If I questioned her choices, I'd be accused of lacking compassion. If I demanded accountability, I'd be told I was abandoning family. They weren't asking. They were assigning. So I didn't yell. I didn't defend my character. I didn't itemize the past. I said, I need time to think. And I left. Because the only leverage I had wasn't money. It was participation. The escalation began the next morning. My dad called before work. We need to move quickly, he said. Delays make this worse. I said I was reviewing my finances. He shifted tone. This is your sister's future. By afternoon, it was obligation. After everything we've done for you. By evening, it was legacy. What kind of daughter walks away? My sister texted separately. I'm scared. I can't go to jail. You know I'm not built for this. The urgency was real. But urgency doesn't determine ownership. When I didn't respond immediately, my dad sent a longer message. If this becomes public, it affects all of us. Employers talk. Reputations matter. There it was. Not just guilt. Containment. If I paid, it stayed quiet. If I refused, it expanded. He implied that protecting my own record might require cooperation. Not a direct threat. Just proximity. I felt something shift internally then. Not panic. Separation. I opened my laptop that night and began planning as if I were not a daughter in crisis, but a third party assessing exposure. Because that's what I was. I started with documentation. Bank records. 3 years back. I downloaded statements and stored them in encrypted folders. I searched my email for her name, for shared transactions, for anything that could be misinterpreted. Nothing. I requested a credit report. Clean. I saved every message my dad and sister sent about the situation. Screenshots with timestamps. Cloud backups. External drive. Not because I expected to use them. Because clarity requires record. I researched liability laws in our state. Family members are not automatically responsible for restitution unless assets are commingled or contracts are shared. They weren't. I consulted a lawyer quietly. A brief consultation under the guise of hypothetical exposure. He confirmed what I already suspected. You are not legally obligated, he said. Do not transfer funds. Do not sign anything. He paused before adding, pressure doesn't equal liability. That sentence anchored me. I printed it in my mind. Pressure doesn't equal liability. I reviewed my lease. Month to month after March. I reviewed my job's remote work policy. Flexible. I checked flight prices. One-way tickets weren't expensive. Preparation felt different than reaction. Each file saved. Each screenshot captured. Each account verified. The more procedural I became, the less emotional it felt. This wasn't about betrayal. It was about containment. And I was stepping outside the blast radius. When I finally gave my answer, it was over the phone. My dad began reciting numbers again. Negotiation strategies. Installment plans. I'm not paying, I said. Silence. Then a laugh. Short. Disbelieving. Don't be dramatic. I'm not paying. You can't be serious. I am. He pivoted quickly. So you're letting your sister face charges? I'm not involved in her case. That's cold. I didn't respond. My sister took the phone. I would do it for you. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she didn't. I'm not paying, I repeated. There was no speech about boundaries. No lecture about accountability. Just a decision. Irreversible. The pressure spiked for 48 hours. Calls. Texts. Extended family reaching out concerned. I stayed consistent. No argument. No counterattack. No explanation beyond repetition. Eventually, the intensity plateaued. Because coercion requires movement. And I stopped moving. Refusing wasn't the final step. Staying was still exposure. If investigations expanded, proximity could invite inconvenience. Questions. Appearances. Emotional ambushes. I didn't want to spend the next year defending something that was never mine. So I made the decision quietly. I accepted a remote contract opportunity my company had mentioned months earlier. Different city. Different time zone. I notified my landlord I wouldn't renew. I sold furniture I didn't need. Booked a one-way ticket for a Tuesday morning. No announcement. No social media post. I separated joint streaming accounts. Changed passwords. Updated mailing addresses. Logistical detachment creates emotional space. The closer departure got, the calmer I felt. Not because I was escaping consequences. Because I was refusing inheritance of a role. The fixer. The absorber. The logical solution. I declined the position. From a distance, consequences sound different. 3 weeks after I left, I received a voicemail. Not from my dad. From my sister. Auditors had expanded the review window. Additional discrepancies surfaced. Internal emails were being examined. Supervisors questioned. I listened without interrupting. She didn't ask for money this time. She asked if I thought they'd go easy. I don't know, I said. Which was true. My dad sent fewer messages. Short updates. Lawyers involved. Negotiations ongoing. The tone had shifted from authority to management. There were social ripples too. Extended family stopped calling me. Not out of anger. Out of discomfort. Without my participation, the narrative had to adjust. The truth does that. It expands to fill silence. Investigations trace patterns without emotion. Login timestamps. Authorization trails. Access logs. Facts don't respond to guilt. They respond to evidence. By the time formal charges were filed, reduced through cooperation, my involvement was non-existent. No subpoena. No inquiry. Distance protected clarity. And clarity protected me. There was no triumph in hearing outcomes. Just confirmation. What was hers remained hers. What was mine remained intact. The morning I left, the airport felt ordinary. People in lines. Rolling luggage. Overpriced coffee. No cinematic music. Just movement. My phone buzzed once while I waited at the gate. A message from my dad. We'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable. I turned the phone face down. Then I opened settings. Silenced notifications from the family group chat. Archived the thread. Not deleted. Archived. I wasn't erasing history. I was repositioning it. When boarding was called, I stood, adjusted my bag on my shoulder, and walked forward. No dramatic goodbye. No last look back. Just a step across a threshold that had been forming for years. Relief is quieter than people expect. It isn't euphoria. It's steadiness. In the new city, my apartment was smaller. The streets unfamiliar. The grocery store layout inefficient. But my phone was calm. My accounts were untouched. My name wasn't attached to filings. For the first time, capability existed without extraction. I thought about the roles we inherit without signing for them. The reliable one. The strong one. The solution. They sound like compliments. Until they become cages. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left to end participation. Family isn't defined by how much damage you can absorb. It's defined by whether your presence is respected without condition. Choosing safety over approval felt unnatural at first. Then necessary. Then obvious. Months later, communication resumed in measured doses. Updates about court dates. Brief logistical questions. No one mentioned the number that had been slid across the table. It no longer belonged to me. And neither did the expectation. Sometimes people think strength looks like standing your ground and fighting. Sometimes it looks like stepping out of range entirely. He thought I would fold under pressure. Instead, I removed the surface he was pressing against. And without resistance to push on, the force redirected where it always should have been. I didn't expose anyone. I didn't retaliate. I let documentation, distance, and procedure do what emotion never could. Tell the truth without my participation. In the end, nothing dramatic marked the shift. No apology. No grand reconciliation. Just a quiet reordering. She faced what she created. He adjusted to what I declined. And I kept walking. Not angry. Not vindicated. Just no longer available for assignment. That was the only resolution I needed. And it was irreversible.